You've been told your whole life that connection is everything, that being constantly available, constantly responsive, constantly seen is what makes you relevant. But no one told you that in the process of being everything to everyone, you slowly lose access to yourself. What you call your personality often becomes a collage of expectations, reactions, and adaptations shaped by the environments you move through daily. And in 2026, with every notification, every message, every algorithm feeding you a version of who you should be, your internal voice is getting quieter. Strategic solitude is not about running away from people. It is about returning to the only place where your identity can exist without interference. Most people are not afraid of being alone because of loneliness itself. They are afraid of what silence reveals. When the noise stops, there is no distraction from your own thoughts, no buffering through external input, no quick escape into someone else's opinions. You are left with your raw, unedited internal state. For many, this feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, because they have not spent enough uninterrupted time with themselves to recognize what is truly theirs. The modern world rewards constant engagement. Your brain is trained to seek microdoses of stimulation. Scrolling, checking, responding. Each interaction provides a small hit of dopamine, reinforcing the habit of external orientation. Over time, this creates a dependency. Your sense of self begins to rely on feedback loops. Likes, replies, validation, acknowledgement. Without them, there is a perceived drop in value, even if nothing about you has actually changed. This is where the mirage begins. You start confusing visibility with identity. You assume that who you are is reflected in how others respond to you. But the truth is, constant exposure does not clarify identity, it distorts it. When you are always reacting, you are rarely originating. When you are always consuming, you are rarely creating. Strategic solitude interrupts this cycle. It is not accidental isolation. It is intentional withdrawal. It is the conscious decision to remove yourself from environments that continuously shape your thinking so you can observe what remains when those influences are absent. This is not about cutting people off permanently. It is about creating space where your mind is no longer being programmed in real time. When you step into solitude, the first thing you notice is noise. Not external noise, but internal. Thoughts that were previously buried under constant stimulation begin to surface. Some are repetitive, some are unresolved, some are not even originally yours. They are inherited from past conversations, societal expectations, or long-held assumptions. This is the audit phase. Most people skip this because it feels chaotic, but this chaos is actually data. It is showing you what has been running in the background of your mind without your awareness. Strategic solitude gives you the opportunity to observe these patterns without immediately reacting to them. You begin to ask different questions. Why do I think this way? Where did this belief come from? Is this actually aligned with who I want to be? Without external interference, your answers become clearer. This is where the surgical aspect of solitude becomes evident. You are not just sitting alone. You are actively examining your internal architecture. You are identifying which thoughts are original and which are inherited, which desires are authentic and which are conditioned, which fears are protective and which are outdated. This level of clarity is difficult to achieve in a constantly connected state because your brain does not have the bandwidth to process deeply when it is continuously stimulated. Neurologically, solitude allows the brain to shift out of constant task-switching mode and into deeper states of focus. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and self-regulation, functions more effectively when it is not overloaded with incoming stimuli. At the same time, the default mode network, associated with introspection and self-referential thinking, becomes more active. This is the network that allows you to reflect, to integrate experiences, and to construct a coherent sense of self. In other words, solitude is not just emotionally beneficial, it is biologically necessary for self-discovery. As you spend more time in this state, something begins to shift. You stop looking outward for direction and start developing an internal reference point. This is the foundation of self-governance. Self-governance is the ability to make decisions based on internal clarity rather than external pressure. It is the transition from seeking permission to establishing personal authority. This does not mean ignoring input from others, but it means you are no longer dependent on it to define your direction. You begin to trust your own thinking, not blindly, but through observation and refinement. You test your ideas, you evaluate your responses, and over time, you build a system that is uniquely yours. This is where solitude becomes leverage. Most people are operating in a reactive state, constantly adjusting to external inputs. When you develop clarity through solitude, you gain a different advantage. You are no longer reacting in real time. You are responding from a position of understanding. This creates a gap between stimulus and response, a space where intentionality can exist. In high-pressure situations, this becomes critical. While others are overwhelmed by noise and urgency, you are able to process, prioritize, and act with precision. This is not because you are inherently different, but because you have trained your mind in an environment where it was not constantly interrupted. This is the clarity moat. It is difficult to replicate because it requires something most people avoid, being alone with themselves long enough to understand who they are without external input. However, solitude alone is not the goal. It is the tool. The next phase is integration. Eventually, you will return to environments filled with noise, interaction, and expectation. The challenge is not avoiding these environments, but maintaining your clarity within them. This is where many people lose what they gained, because they re-enter without a system to protect their internal state. Integration requires boundaries, not rigid isolation, but intentional control over your inputs. You become more selective about what you consume, who you engage with, and how much time you spend in reactive environments. You create pockets of solitude within your daily life, what can be called micro-solitude. This could be moments in the morning before engaging with your phone, short periods during the day where you disconnect from external input, or intentional time set aside for reflection. These moments act as recalibration points, preventing the accumulation of noise. Over time, this becomes a rhythm. You are no longer oscillating between total immersion and total withdrawal. You are maintaining a steady balance where solitude and connection coexist in a way that supports your clarity rather than disrupting it. This is where the long-term transformation becomes visible. You begin to operate with a sense of groundedness that is not easily shaken by external fluctuations. Your decisions are more aligned. Your responses are less reactive. Your sense of self is not constantly shifting based on feedback. You are not disconnected from others, but you are no longer defined by them. This is the true outcome of strategic solitude. It is not isolation for the sake of separation. It is isolation for the sake of integration. It is the process of stripping away what is not yours so you can clearly see what is. And once you see it, you can build from it. You can create a life that is not based on imitation, but on intention. Not on expectation, but on alignment. Not on constant noise, but on deliberate clarity. So if you feel the pull to step back, to disconnect, to spend time alone, do not immediately interpret it as something negative. It may be your mind signaling that it needs space to process, to reset, to recalibrate. Honor that signal, because in a world that is constantly trying to shape you, the ability to return to yourself is not a weakness. It is your greatest form of strength. Mind care is self-care.